I got a package today. At the same time, I did some shopping. Go over my shopping first here. I need to make legs for the Joust cocktail to get it so that the wood is not on the ground. The laminate is damaged, and the plywood on the back side, inside, is damaged from absorbing moisture from the wood being on the ground and the ground being wet somewhere. So I mentioned in my other videos that my last Joust cocktail 10 years ago had the square block feet underneath it, but it was missing one and another one was loose. And I made two to replace the missing one and the damaged one. This cocktail is missing all five, two on each corner and then one in the middle of the coin box area inside there. So I went through my pictures from 10 years ago. I didn't write down exact details, but going through my old archived website picture and text, it turns out that the wooden blocks on the bottom of the Joust cocktail are 2-inch by 2-inch squares of plywood with the piece that glues up into or onto the bottom of the cabinet being inch thick, and then there's a piece of 1/2 inch thick, both of them plywood, and a T-nut is pounded into this piece before it's glued on. So it's a sandwich 2x2 block of 1-inch plywood, a T-nut nailed into a 1/2 inch piece of plywood, and they're both glued together, and there's a hole drilled through the center of both pieces where the shaft of the leg leveler goes. So I have some 1/2 inch plywood, but 1-inch thick plywood is not something that's I can just go to the hardware store and buy. They were 1-inch, not where you get a 2x4 and it's not actually 2 inches by 4 inches. It was actually 1-inch thick plywood and a 1/2 inch thick piece of plywood. So I've got lots of 3/4 inch scraps of plywood, but not 1-inch thick. So I went to Home Depot, I didn't find anything. Then I went to Lowe's, and I think this is what I ended up doing last time. This is a piece of like molding from the Lowe's department where they have project wood. There's the part number and barcode. And it is actually 1 1/16 of an inch thick, so it's a 1/16 inch thicker than the original plywood. And you can see right here there's a line, and here there's a line where it's actually 3 different pieces of wood that are glued together to make up the total, whatever you want to call that, width in this direction. So I need 5 2-inch by 2-inch blocks. So this one comes up right before the glue joint, and then the next one will be across the glue joint, and the third one will be across the glue joint. Or I could make a 2-inch block and then start another 2-inch block so it's avoiding the glue joint to make it stronger. But then I'd only get 4 2-inch blocks out of this piece of wood, because the final glue joint, there isn't 2 inches from there up to where this routing for the molding edge is. So I think I'm gonna, and this was $7. So spend another $7 just to make one more 2x2 block. I think I'm going to try and just make these with the glued piece. So at the very least, I'll end up with 2 blocks that are 2x2 with no glue seam. So if these end up cracking as I'm drilling the holes in them and nailing to the bottom of the cabinet, then I can go back and buy another one of these, which I would have to anyway, and then make sure I avoid the glue joint. But this is the best way I could find, and it's supposed to be hardwood, although it doesn't say exactly what it is. It's the best way I could find, other than trying to figure out a cheap way to find a piece of scrap 1-inch, true 1-inch thick plywood. So between that, this, the leg levelers, and the T-nuts, I should be able to make the feet to put on the bottom of the cabinet. One thing to know, again for my notes from 10 years ago, these are not an exact match to what was on the cab. They were this exact same type, the metal bottom with a rubber piece in the middle. It's just that the threaded portion was a bit longer, which my notes didn't say how much longer. And my notes said that I bought a replacement set of feet that was a bit shorter. So these are the same type that I bought 10 years ago. Note, these are Scotch leveling guides that I got from Lowe's. They were just under $5 for 4, and I need 5, unfortunately. Home Depot also has what looks to me to be the exact same parts, probably made in the exact same factory, but it was under a different brand. I want to say it's Everbuilt, something like that. It's a different brand, but it's the exact same 1 1/16 inch long threaded metal furniture levelers, furniture guides, whatever you want to call them. So because that's the style that was originally used on the cabinet, I'm going to go ahead and use those as opposed to using like pinball or full-size arcade cabinet levelers. There is a hole drilled in the bottom of the Joust cabinet that these will fit. So if you screw these all the way in so they go up into the cabinet, which I'm not sure these even will because they're a little bit, again, they're a little bit shorter than the original ones from 1982. So that hole is, I don't think, big enough to fit a traditional upright cabinet's leg leveler threaded piece, because these are smaller diameter than the standard arcade leg levelers. So this is the type that was originally used. So that's the plan there, is to make those feet hopefully today, if I can get off my rear after 3 hardware store trips and get out there and make some cuts. The other thing I had bought some of these from Pinball Life when I bought my red translucent buttons for the Joust, but they ended up being a shorter base than this. This right here, and again, here's the part numbers and the name. These are a match for the coin door bulb holders. And I guess these would be called CoinCo compatible, because they're the same ones that are here in this Joust single coin door. And they are the same as are used in my Asteroids Deluxe that has a short somewhere on the 6.3 volt line, which, like I said previously, I'm pretty sure is because the bulb sockets are no good. These two terminals on the Asteroids Deluxe, they're super sloppy loose, and I think the metal's shorting somewhere internally. So I got that from Marco, and then the other thing that I got, just because I don't know why, cable clamp. Again, there is the part numbers for Marco. And these, I was having a hard time finding on Amazon. There's tons of cable clamps, but they're not this type. So there must be another search term that I couldn't figure out for nylon cable clamps. Right? These are 1/4 inch opening here, 1/4 inch tall, and the screw holds the base piece and it loops around, so you can tuck wires in or pull wires out. You don't have to remove the screw if you're adding or removing wires from these wire clamps. And you can see also that this one has 4 little plastic, or sorry, it's nylon, but 4 little nubs around it. That is exactly the same as this Joust uses. And again, Marco has these because Williams Bally made pinball machines, and they're used in pinball machines. So several pinball companies had this exact same thing, but I couldn't find online the actual manufacturer. I think these are 36 cents each at most of the pinball places. There's got to be the company that makes these where you can buy hundreds and, end up buying them for a lot cheaper than 36 cents each, but I couldn't find it. So if somebody else finds that, kudos to you, and maybe post a comment so other people can find it, because the only place I found this was searching cable clamps on the Clav forums. I even searched on Pinside and didn't really find anything, but I found somebody that had a link to these on the Marco pinball site. So I got those, and then I got a few of these. These are a similar thing, also match in the cabinet. These are 1/2 inch. Again, they're just one piece of nylon curled, so you can, once it's screwed down, you can still remove or add wires to it without having 2 different pieces that clamp together. So you have to take the screw off to open it to add or remove wires and then close it back down again. So these 1/2 inch ones, put that up there. The part numbers for the 1/2 inch ones. I probably should have got more than 6 just to have for other projects. Because like I said, when I get an old arcade project or whatever, I salvage all the parts I can, but I'm out of these. I might have 1, and then all the others I have are the ones where the plastic, both pieces screw down, so you have to take the screw out to add or remove wires. The other thing I got, I found looking through my reference photos of the Joust cocktail control panels. I thought that these cable clamps, these are the ones that are used on the control panel to hold the wires down. I thought they were held in place by these type of self-tapping screws, minus the fact that these actually have a slotted screw head, the type that are identical to this but without a slotted head that you can get at hardware stores. So Marco had these screws, and they're number 6 screws, and I think I need number 8 screws. These look a bit small to me compared with my photos, and compared kind of to the openings in the nylon cable clamp pieces. So I haven't taken one of my control panels yet and actually test fit this in. It would go in that hole there, just the remains of where one of those cable clamps goes. Holding up to it, maybe that is the right size. I'm not positive. So I probably should have checked that. It would have taken just a few seconds before I made this video, but they only had the number 6 black oxide screws with that extra. You see how they've got that extra, almost looks like a built-in washer. Just makes the head wider. So if these don't work, then Amazon not only has these in 6, they also have them in number 8, which would be the next size up if these are too small. I just figured because I was on Marco's site and ordering the other stuff, I'd go ahead and get 10 of these. I believe these were also 36 cents, just like the cable clamps, which on Amazon you can get them way cheaper for that because you can buy them by the 100. Not that I need 100. So there you go. These were used in the Joust cocktail control panels, not these, which surprised me because I don't know that I even noticed that before 10 years ago. Another thing, since I'm talking about stuff I bought, the control panels I thought used 9-pin connectors. They do use the .062 Molex connectors, which is smaller than the more common .093 that are used in upright cabinets. They use these smaller ones. Part of the reason they use the smaller ones, which I don't have a loose one hanging around here, is because they have this small, relatively small opening to pass through. And so the .093 connector is a little bit big to fit through that hole. But I thought that the control panels used 9-pin, and then I looked at my reference photos and they use a 12-pin, which I have no idea why. I found that out after I got back from Vetco in Bellevue, Washington, where I bought some 9-pin because I only had one. And I know it uses a 9-pin for the coin door. So I figured it uses 9-pin for the control panels. But looking at my reference pictures, it uses 10. Now the thing about that that's really confusing to me is, again, this is obviously not going to be an original control panel. I mean, original wiring and configuration, but on an original Joust control panel, you have two wires that have the voltage and the return for the bulbs, right? They loop over here, and then two come off of here and go down to the connector. You have one button, so that's two wires for the bulbs, a signal wire for the button, a signal wire for the left joystick, signal wire for right joystick, and one more for ground. So that's 6 wires you have coming off of a Joust control panel, and yet they used 12-pin connectors. I did have 12-pin connectors, 2 of them, in my parts, so it's not like I have to go back to Bellevue to buy more. And in fact, it gets me wondering, what am I doing here? Because again, I don't have the original wires. Originally, I'm using a yellow wire and a yellow wire with a white stripe, which is similar to what was used by Williams, but those are from an old JAMA harness. Those aren't original Williams correct wire colors. I believe it was yellow and white with a yellow stripe originally. And my joystick, of course, at this point isn't original, and I don't have the original colors that came off of the joystick or the button, because those were all orange with different colored stripes on them to delineate which wire it was. Not having schematics for the cocktail is also an issue. But for some reason, I'm going to go ahead and use 12-pin connectors and wire them to the best I can look in my pictures, which is basically I can only determine the 2 bulb wires, the white with yellow and the yellow. And I think everything else is orange with a colored stripe. So I'm just choosing to do based on the upright Joust, where I think it goes in numerical order. I think it is flap right left, so I'm going to do flap right left just because, even though again it's not original, and if I ever try and return it to an actual 100% original machine, I'll probably end up having to redo these anyway, but at least I'll have the connectors, the correct connectors. Also at Vetco, I bought one of these. This is a power distribution block, obviously 4 terminals on each side with a plastic cover. Credit goes to Vintage Arcade Gal. She's got a video on her channel where she uses these. And so I searched online and I found I could buy them on Amazon, but I also found that Vetco had them. Although if you're seeing this video about the time I post it, note that I bought the last 2 of these that they had. They do have some with smaller terminal connections, but this is kind of the standard size terminal connection you would normally use a spade connector for. So I bought one that I'm going to put on the power board, and I will probably have, because the J-Rock board does not use -5 volts, I will have -5 volts going from the switcher to this side of the distribution block, and then I'll loop it to another couple terminals. So I have 3 terminals with -5 volts, and then I will hook the wires that go to control panel 1, 2, and coin door to this side of the terminal block to the rest of the wiring harness, which will get me lights on the control panels and the coin door. And then the reason I bought 2 of them, I was going to buy 3, but they only had 2, is I have another one of these transformers, and I might just make another power board with it, similar to this one, that's a complete power board that I could throw into a JAMA cabinet if I end up with another JAMA cabinet at some point that doesn't have any power board in it. Or if I want to make a project or something, I can duplicate this setup because I still have another one of the on-off switches, power cords, filter assembly. Probably need another single fuse holder. Should have looked at that at Vetco. But yeah, I've got basically just about all I need to make another one of these setups that I can use in a cab at some point if I ever need it. So I bought some of those spare parts. Another thing, when we're talking parts here, I have several micro switches. You'll see that these are fairly thin. The micro switches that Williams used on their control panels. That's a bad example because they routed that for a Nintendo button holder. But you can see right here, thankfully unaffected by the routing here, that's where the original leaf switch went for this game, for the original flap button. And what Williams did is they just screwed the leaf switch buttons to the base of that control panel. Unfortunately, the leaf switch buttons that Williams used were thicker than this. Again, yeah, sorry, this is in the bag. I didn't plan on going quite this in depth into parts, but since they were here, you can see that that's the terminals, the actual leaf switches are coming out from the center of that black plastic. The Williams ones have more plastic below the leaf switch than these. So these sit too low to the wood to work properly with the leaf buttons on those control panels. But years ago, I bought some of these, probably from Marco. These are like a fiber, kind of like a, I think they're like fiberglass, or they're some kind of plastic. Spacers for leaf switch. I also, way back 10 years ago, made my own spacers out of some plastic I have in my garage. So I used hacksaw, Dremel, and drill to make some that thick, and then some different plexiglass from an old arcade cabinet to make some even thicker. And it turns out that one of these thicker ones with one of the fiber pieces placed underneath this leaf switch gets it just the right height. So I don't have to spend any money looking for the other type of leaf switches. I can just add these 2 spacers underneath it and it'll work fine. Again, if I was going to do a mint rebuild, I would get the original switches, but this is cost me absolutely nothing, and I had the parts on hand. I have a 3D printer, and I've seen that somebody makes, but I haven't found them online to print myself, 3D printed versions of these, and they would be simple to make. I've printed a lot of stuff, but I have not gotten into designing things, but it should be very easy to design that. It's just a rectangle with a couple holes in it, and you could even adjust the height in your printer to print at the exact height you need. I have seen leaf switch button holders on Thingiverse that you can print, and part of it is the piece that holds the leaf switch, so you could just take those into Mesh Mixer or even drop them below the print bed on your 3D printer slicer program and just cut that part out and just print that part, and without even having to design anything, it'd probably work. But there we go. Lots of parts collected in the last few days, and the major one being today, like I said, I'm going to try and get some bottom feet made. I still need to get the T-molding, or not the T-molding, the T-nuts. And after I make these, I have to drill a hole through, pound T-nuts in, glue the two blocks together, and then spray paint them black, which is, they were satin black, just like the cabinet originally. So there we go. Another group of parts. Oh, and coincidence, anybody watching this video, they sent me with my Marco order. They usually send you show flyers. I got 3 flyers for the same show, which happens to be the show that I tend to volunteer at. It is the Pacific Northwest Pinball and Arcade Show, and it is June 2nd through 4th at the Greater Tacoma Convention Center. So if you are in Washington State or near it and want to see a pinball show, lots of pinball machines and arcades, all on free play, pay to get in. You can buy a weekend pass, you can buy a single day pass, and all the games are free play. Go to northwestpinballshow.com and you can find out more details. So that's it for this video. I will make another one, I guess, when I have some feet made.